Welcome to the GreatBase Podcast, episode 133. I'm Steve Smith along with Jacob Hansen. Looking forward to talking to Jacob. He's here with a group of kids from Utah. I think it's a great idea, or maybe you could start there, but bringing the kids in to be ball boys. But Jacob is going to talk about his tennis background, and what's going to be great is he's going to talk about Peter Burwash, one of our pillars, the great late Peter Burwash. But Jacob, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Steve.
Oh, you're more than welcome. Let's just start with that. Great idea. You called the Delray Open, and you have some players that you brought in from Utah to be ball kids?
Yeah, we've got 14 kids here. Never been to the tournament before, but we figured we were coming here anyways, so we might as well see if they'd take us for the tournament, and they did. So
I was telling you, we were talking about that earlier today, the most nervous I've ever been in tennis, the pro tournament with some big-time tennis players. I mean, Jimmy Connor's #1 in the world. Late 70s, and I was in charge of the ball boys, ball girls. I remember being up in the stadium, and the matches were televised. It was a tune-up for the U.S. Open. And very young ball kids. Your kids are older, the ones that are here, right?
Yeah, mostly 14 to 18.
Yeah, that's good. And we're going to talk later about Peter Burwash. We first came on his own nickel to train coaches at Tyler Junior College, Tennis Tech. He pulled me out and he said, all right, Steve, got to see if you can think on your feet. And you're going to take the players from the program, the seminar, and train them to be ball kids. But I was already prepared because I had that experience. But let's get going with your tennis background. Tell us where you got started in this great game of tennis.
Yeah, so I started playing when I was about 14. My grandpa thought I was too slow on the baseball path, so running the bases, so he thought it might speed me up. And a couple things happened. I ended up falling in love with the game and wanted to play tennis more than I wanted to be on the baseball field. And the other thing is I didn't realize it, but my vision had gone, and all of a sudden I couldn't hit anymore. And so it took me 2 years after playing tennis to realize I needed glasses. So it ended up being fortunate because maybe I would have played baseball, and that would have been the end of tennis. So.
And where did you grow up?
I grew up in Southern California, Orange County area. So it was a tennis hotbed, but I didn't really grow up in it and didn't start playing until I was 14 and just played high school and a few junior tournaments here and there. But that was really it.
But baseball, I remember one summer asking my mother, I like to just shoot pucks in the driveway. Can I not play baseball? And she said, no, you have to play baseball. It's un-American not to play baseball. People used to ask me, do you switch hit? I said, no, I can just shadow swing both ways. I can't hit either way. That's got to be one of the toughest things in sport is to hit a baseball.
Yeah. my grandpa played AAA ball. His brother played a few games in the majors. And then I had another, great uncle that was, I think it was a halfback for UCLA. So we came from a big sporting family, and baseball was probably the favorite sport. So
did that help you with your serve?
It did once I really fixed a few things in my serve.
Isn't that amazing? All these kids years ago. It wasn't fair for girls back in the day. If you played sports, you were called a tomboy. But if you could throw a baseball, you'd take a tennis lesson and you'd be told down together, up together, scratch your back, the trophy look.
Yep. Yeah, I didn't have enough coil, and I could throw a baseball over 80 miles an hour, and I could barely serve that fast. So it was always a disconnect for me.
And it was your grandfather who told you should switch sports?
Well, he was trying to get me to move a little faster running, so he thought changing direction might be good for me. And so, the plan was to play baseball, and I really had this experience where I came out, couldn't hit a fastball, couldn't hit anything in batting practice. And I was always in all-star teams and those kind of things playing, doing really well in the game and all. It was like something happened and I couldn't hit anymore. So I was like, well, I better go play tennis now. And come to find out about a year or two later, I couldn't see anymore. I needed glasses, wow. So I wore glasses, and I really don't think I would have ever played tennis had that not happened. So,
my great uncle Carl, he one time told me, "Hey, the way you practice is something. I'll tell you." He said, "I'll tell you what. You'll go the furthest with this path." He goes, "I'll buy you a dozen footballs, and you just go kick field goals all day." He kind of gave me the Rudy speech. You're going to be 5'0", 100-0. You should become a field goal kicker. Mm-hmm. But in upstate New York, where I'm from, Gogolaks, they came from Hungary and they ended up in Ogdensburg, New York, and they were the first soccer-style kickers.
Okay.
They became big time. But yeah, I mean, I think of baseball. I think now of pickleball, because pickleball is wiffle ball. We had a little baseball diamond in our backyard, and I remember I couldn't hit a wiffle ball, but then they made this big bat as big as a watermelon, so then I could hit a little bit. So how about lessons? Did you start with lessons?
Not really. No, I just played high school and, just couldn't afford lessons, and it just wasn't a big sport in our family at that time in terms of just really taking it serious. So really just played through high school, and I ended up winning, our league, and the thing that I could do, I could pitch. So right away I kind of had a palm down type of a serve and could kick the ball, and I loved to volley. So I just got the net, and that really helped me. So, I did pretty good considering the background, and, won a couple league titles and doubles, and then it was kind of like, well, I went off to college and started studying economics, but I just never felt like I was done with the sport. It was a little frustrating because from the back of the court, I always felt like, why am I struggling from the back of the court? And so I kind of just always had an itch. And it was when I was in college. I was in Northern California, and one of the coaches of the local club, he just knew I loved tennis and was still kind of working at it. And he told me, look, if you want to, stay in the game and you want to play more and you want to kind of get better, there's this company called PBI. And so that kind of started my road down Peter Burwash International. But yeah, that really was kind of my formative years. Wasn't that long, before I was 18.
For our listeners, a little trivia. Jacob is the same age as Jack Benny, the late, great Jack Benny, comedian. He used to always tell people he was 39. To be 39 again. With when was that when you went to work for PBI?
Just after college. So it was about 25, 26. And just this one gentleman told me about it, and then I pulled out their ad out of the back of a tennis magazine and got their phone number and called up Roger Derone, and they told me, well, when you graduate college, give us a call again, and so I did. So
tell us about the interview process. I mean, I didn't go through that, but I remember getting an application because Peter was a headliner. He was one of the big names. This would have been in the 70s. Camp Manitowoc and Perry Sound. I remember having notes. Dennis McCreevy, who played for Redlands, that was one of my first connections. That he had been trained by Peter. Mm-hmm. And for many, many summers, people would go, Perry Sound, the home of Bobby Orr, would go, and Peter would train coaches. But what a guy, ahead of his time, pioneer. Again, we've talked about it where, people really needed to know Peter Burwash. I think, people will take a name pro like that, someone's accomplished, and sometimes it's sour grapes that they don't look for the positives. Not that there's any overwhelming negatives by any means, but the interview process. Yeah. I mean, I have my stories because I had many students who interviewed with Peter or worked for Peter. But go ahead, tell us a little bit about
that. So going into PBI, I didn't know anything about Peter. I mean, so kind of to prepare for the interview process, I read a few of his books, and I ended up going to a couple different sites just to kind of meet some other pros that were already working for the company and just kind of do some homework going into it, because I did get the impression that Peter was, from reading his books, was pretty intense and serious. So I think there was maybe 7 or 8 of us that went. We were at Carmel Valley Ranch, the resort there, and so we all 8 of us showed up, and we started off with a group interview, and it was it was just kind of started off unlike anything else. They kind of laid out the day, but it wasn't too long before they started asking us questions. And, Peter asked me, what's one thing you've accomplished or experienced in life that nobody else has? And when you answered, you had to stand up. So I just stood up and thought for about, it was really about 30 seconds to a minute. I just stood there, and then I sat back down. And Peter said, good answer. So like right off the bat, it was going to be a little different.
With Peter, certainly his interviews were challenging.
Yes. Yeah, there was, I think he always wanted to figure out what your your breaking point was going to be. And he also wanted to see if you could admit to a fault. I think he was always, there was a couple of people in the interview where he would just ask you, what's your weakness? And if they said, I care too much, that wasn't going to pass. He was going to basically get you to admit a real fault or a flaw in you and see if you could be honest about it and share it in front of other people. And he would not stop until you actually got to something that was meaningful.
Not too long ago, I heard from a young coach who talked about his boss, an old coach. And the old coach, when he's talking to a recruit, a college tennis player and their parents, he tries to sit down and have them, be at a table and, we're going to talk to the restaurant closes, and just to see their enthusiasm for, can they hang in there? After an hour, they start looking at their watch and, but it's just going, talking about tennis. So Peter definitely would get people exhausted. I never experienced this, but my students did years ago before the internet. For example, he'd have a letter written in Portuguese. And he'd give everybody a photocopy. And he would find out there was nobody within the group that could speak Portuguese. And he'd say, okay, get this letter translated by tomorrow morning.
Yeah.
Just challenging you to think on your feet. Like, okay, I'm going to go to the restaurant, the waiter, the waitresses, the busboys. I'm going to find someone who can speak Portuguese.
Yeah.
And, it's so worldly. I don't think anybody, I think of Raven Klaassen maybe because he's been to so many countries in Africa, and certainly there's others, but Peter traveled to so many countries.
Yeah.
But I think, dropping the pencil, backing up, seeing if people are going to pick it up. They would, not Peter himself, but Peter's organization, they'd get through, when they would come to our college campus, some of them, they would just possibly have a very short preliminary interview. And then when they did get to meet with Peter, I believe for the longest time, he was always at the interviews.
Yeah, he was at my interview, and I don't think he missed one for a very long time. And yeah, it was an experience. He had 3 people with him from the company that he brought along to kind of they were just sitting back, observing, kind of looking at body language, kind of seeing when he pushed our buttons, how we were reacting and getting their impressions.
But we would have a couple students from the same program go to the same group interview, and he would, I remember one student from Singapore going in, being done with Peter, then a student from Sweden went in, and Peter said, your classmate told me that you're a drunk. It just shock treatment, see how they would respond to that.
Yep. And then, after the morning session where it was kind of groups and just we were able to ask questions, so they were kind of seeing the quality of our questions that we had for them. But then we went into the match play. And so you got matched up to play against somebody, and I ended up playing against Arturo Navarro, who I think he played at one of the big schools, and I am pretty insecure about my game with my background and playing against college guys. And I remember being thrilled. I got 4 points off of him in a tiebreak, and we get back from this portion of it, and sure enough, he's like, we don't care who got what on those. We were watching the person that we assigned to be the ball boy, and and so you were supposed to keep score, and you guys were supposed to be, managing the match and everything. And so they were always putting you in a situation where the least, you thought you had the least important job, perhaps as the ball boy, but he was trying to see how seriously you might take it and stuff. So
it's so well traveled. I think of it being in Japan many times, and it seems like the Japanese have, no matter what job they're doing, say, for example, you pull into a gas station, and it's just like it was in the U.S. years ago. There comes 2 attendants come out, and they have so much pride for their job. But Peter was very service-oriented. Mm-hmm. I think for the listeners who don't know much about Peter Burwash, a Canadian, grew up playing ice hockey, but he was a very, very good tennis player. Mm-hmm. He was so acrobatic. And
flying Canadian.
Yeah. So you got through the interview process, so then there was the training. The training was 450 hours?
Yeah, so then, went through that, finished up the interview. You do a private interview with Peter, and I'll just share his first comment to me was, when I stepped into this interview, he's like, you don't like me very much, do you? And he said my assistants have been observing, and you don't really have positive body language. What's going on? Just kind of wanted to see what I would say. But anyway, so I did make it through that question, and we got sent to Georgia. I think it's Lake Oconee outside of Atlanta. And so there was about probably 7 or 8 of us from, that were sent there. And so then you're just 30 straight days with the trainees, and they have a few rotating people coming through to do different training on whether it's, coaching or it's programming or whatever it is. Obviously PBI specialized, in club and hotel, high-end type of resorts and things like that. So, you run the gamut every day. It's, there's no breaks or anything, and they really push you. So it was good.
We got to go through the different places that you worked or traveled to, just even with their annual meeting they had. With, certainly the notes I had from the Camp Manitowobbing, listening to Peter, like every year he was a headliner at the Roosevelt, New York. And then obviously he, prolific, dynamic speaker. I mean, I still to this day have these old cassette tapes, audio cassette tapes of Peter, many books. But he called me up. He was the first guy who called me up and said, I'm interested, because he read, you would know, he had every section, every country. He's got every newsletter, every magazine. And he said, I'm very curious of what you're doing. I'd like to come visit you. And he came on his own nickel. And then after that, every year, we had these weekend workshops that were 16 hours. I think 4 on Friday, 8 on Saturday, 4 on Sunday. And we got to the point where we could give them our own outline. Mm-hmm. But those were, we could talk about those. Those were just phenomenal training sessions. The organization, Peter and PBI, helped me so much in training coaches. I think so much of that's gone away. I mean, some big buzzwords. I mean, one besides service would be professionalism. Mm-hmm. Some of the lines I use are 100% Peter Burwash. The tennis pro is one step above a beach bum.
Yeah.
They just show up. Maybe they have sunscreen. They definitely have their sunglasses and their racket, and that's it. Yeah. They're not on time. They're not ready to write anything down. They're not looking to do any prep work. It's like, okay, I'll just start feeding balls.
Yeah. Yeah, and that was the training. It was very much, probably less than half of it was on court. They really went through the idea that, a successful tennis program you had to be able to teach, but you needed to be able to give a social outlet to people, and you really needed to give a competitive outlet to people to have a successful club. So they really kind of went through, all the different facets of, how to really round out your program. It wasn't just going to be on court, but you needed to, if you're at a country club or you're at a hotel, you need to be able to entertain a little bit and create a social environment. So they were very good about working through that.
We talked about it briefly. Peter spent some time, I don't know how much, but working with John Gardner. John Gardner at one time had a tennis camp that was just for senators. Mm-hmm. And to actually work for John Gardner, he had the camps where it's all guys on the staff, and they're all wearing a blazer, but you go in and you have to know how to play chess, backgammon, bridge. Mm-hmm. So Peter certainly he had his training, but he was very, very young when he set up PBI.
Yeah, I think he was a very young man, still in maybe late 20s when he really started the company, and had a few key influences that helped him set it up. But he wasn't that old to be doing all of this. But
I think with the listeners, his energy level, he always seemed like a young guy. Of course, I guess you could talk a little bit about how you listened to the podcast that we had on. That's how you and I met. Is we had a podcast, and this was before he passed away. Mm-hmm. And he had a chance to listen to it. And I remember he had a letter drafted to us, and then some key people that had worked for Peter. We were very happy that they had listened to it and liked that. But then you and I have now a connection with you haven't studied the GreatBase, but with the 16 hours that we would have, I think we get back to the off court, the newsletter, the bulletin board, photography. Why don't you comment on that a little bit?
Yeah, one of the neatest things when you went through training was you got a postcard or a personal letter from every pro in the company. So right off, it kind of set this very cool tone when you're in training. You got a note from everybody, and they were coming from all over the world. So it just made you so excited to get out to your next site, to the site, your first site really, And so right away they just try to create a culture of a family, a tribe, and so you felt that connectedness. But yeah, we did newsletters usually I think it was every quarter. And you just wrote about the things that you were working on at your own site, insights that you were having, maybe just some different ideas to go about teaching a concept, or could just be networking. And so we sent those out every quarter. And, it was just a neat way that you're all around the world. You're in, dozens of different countries, but you started to kind of put a face to everybody. So, and then as far as the bulletin boards, we would have classes on how to make a great bulletin board for your site. So how to, just make it look inviting, all of your programming that you wanted people to see about, how can you get it out there and make it look fun and inviting and so forth. So
professional pride, the newsletter, I can remember photography. We would just put down like club communications, and we would make an outline, just really 16 topics. And it was, PBI, really they did it for the good of the game. And there would be four professionals that would show up in the Tyler Junior College campus. Mm-hmm. And those training sessions, I still have some of them on video. It's just amazing. I remember one policy, you could tell us a little bit about club policy. If you were late, you had to pay the company a fine. Perhaps it was a lesson fee or something. Yeah,
it was $50. So yeah, they just stressed on time, 15 minutes early always, and you had to post the policy up front so the guests could see it, and those kind of things. So there was some accountability.
No, the organization did a great job helping us. We always say interview. Life is an interview. As a tennis teacher, you're just going to run into people, whether it's in the grocery store, here, there, everywhere. And perhaps, I'm on stage. I have to be able to meet people. I have to be presentable. And that was back in the day where you either grew a beard or you're clean shaven. Mm-hmm. And, it's like, Peter, you don't want to look like you just came back from a 3-day binge or a 7-day fishing trip. And but Peter would just, the whole organization on an interview is that you never just show up. Mm-hmm. You always write first. I've had so many people that got jobs because of the training that we got from PBI on interviews. Just simply handwritten thank you note. Mm-hmm. I think those days have gone away. Yeah. But showing up, and it was much easier for us to train the guys versus the gals. But you wear a pair of khaki pants and you wear a light blue shirt, and you take your blue blazer and you have it folded underneath your arm. But you never showed up for an interview wearing a warm up. Yeah, you always showed up dressed like a professional. Mm-hmm. And it's just gone away. You ask young people today, and I don't want to come across like I'm beating up young people, but they don't really even know what a letterhead is. Yeah. And those things we did at Tennis Tech, where we'd have a visitor come in, and every visitor would get a thank you letter sent to them. And that, people look back, and I took ideas from Peter Burwash and his organization, and that's where, he's one of our pillars.
Yeah, the last site that I worked at, we got it because the GM, I can't remember how he left the previous, but GMs are always moving from hotel to hotel. And I think he had said that the only people that left him a thank you note upon his departure were our pros. And so sure enough, he ended up at a location with another set of tennis courts, and that's how we ended up there. And so, yeah.
And Peter, again, how he read about the program I was running is he wanted all you pros to, if you read anything, he wanted you pros to send that to him. And
yeah, he did clippings, we were supposed to send in any articles or anything off the internet he thought was either funny, he could use it in a slide for a presentation if it was like a comic or just some picture or anything, any article he wanted sent to him. And so you just sent off anything you might pique his interest that he could use in a talk or,
And my understanding is you really, it was like it was going to be pulled out of a hat where you go. You had no choice on where you went, right?
Yeah, there was no requesting, where you went. I started off in Naples, Florida, and
is that at such and such hotel, the Ritz-Carlton?
It's the Naples Grand, It's gone through some name changes. Waldorf Astoria, Naples at one point, and Naples.
Yeah, I know the ITA. I spoke at their convention a few
they
times.
Had their conference there a few times. Yeah.
And it was at a PBI facility.
Mm-hmm.
I remember being in Jakarta, Indonesia, and staying at a Hilton, and it was there was, I don't know how many, like 25, 30 places around the world.
Yeah, I think, upwards, there's usually about 100 pros, it seemed like, and upwards of somewhere between 30 and 50 sites, just depending on, when it was.
And what about languages? Did you work at any sites where you had to learn a different language?
No, I went to Austria a few times for short little periods, but didn't have to. A lot of the pros did, go learn German or in different languages and so forth. But, I was always pretty much U.S. based.
With creativity, talk a little bit about his tennis. He's so dynamic. And then, one is the traveling show.
Yes.
Why don't you touch upon that, the PBI traveling show?
Well, I've only seen the traveling show at the JW Marriott out in Desert Springs, so they still do a version of it, which is basically it's kind of like a little bit of a Harlem Globetrotter entertainment experience while kind of poking fun at the tennis teaching profession a bit and giving some good teaching information. So, but they used to have a serious staff that would train for it and be able to juggle rackets and, hit various shots, and they would
trick shots,
exactly. Yeah. And they would take it around to the U.S. Open and really to China. They would go everywhere with this show for a period of time.
No, I saw the show in person a couple of times. No, it was Harlem Globetrotters.
Yeah.
It was like captivating. Here's a story for you that Craig Tyler, who spent a lot of time with us, he spent time, 7 years going through a PBI training session. And, also I think, Dennis Vandermeer taking drills from this person, that person. But what Craig did, which was innovative when he was starting college tennis, is they did these PBI type drills. Mm-hmm. And again, some of it from ideas from Dennis, but PBI from the traveling show, how players rotated and this and that. And he would it was so dynamic, it would intimidate the opposing team.
Yeah.
And then when Tyler was at Illinois, a young Ty Tucker, who we had on the podcast, he coaching Ohio State, if people watch how Ohio State warms up, mm-hmm. it actually goes back to the PBI traveling show because Tyler took ideas from PBI, certainly a few others sprinkled in on that, but then he did that, and the Ohio State warm up for their tennis team, it's like, whoa.
Yeah.
These guys are moving and doing these doubles drills, and they're in and out, and it's just high intensity. It's fun. Mm-hmm. But the creativity as far as tennis teaching, is so many things I think it comes back to Peter's training too, to get you to think on your feet, where Peter, kid's got 2 rackets and he's going to jog around the court, bouncing the tennis ball up and down with the 2 rackets. And then he's got to try to do that with 2 rackets and a tennis ball at their feet.
Yeah.
Just creative.
Yeah, good visuals too. Always good visuals. And he made us pros play a lot with our left hand. Every time we'd have an annual meeting, there'd always seem like we would end up with a racket in our opposite hand, just kind of trying to humble us again to remember how hard the game is to learn, I think. But also just,
Yeah, sympathy, empathy is like, okay, you got to put yourself in the other person's shoes, make you feel like a beginner.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I think the thing that I remember the most from our training was, which we weren't allowed to be near a ball hopper when we ran clinics, which was interesting because it really forced you. I think for most pros, that's probably a comfort zone, is to be attached to the hopper at sometimes. And so he really stressed that, you guys have to learn how to teach tennis without needing to be the one, to be running everything from the basket. How can you get, 6 people, 8 people moving and get them engaged and get them learning without, giving them a feed every time. So there was always just, the creativity somewhat stemmed from him forcing you to get off of, maybe where your comfort zone was teaching.
Oh, and also too, it's critical of the tennis students with one line, cross the baseline. Again, it's amazing how many similarities are among the pillars that we have, like Vic Braden did not like the drill where people were just hitting forehands going across the baseline.
Yeah.
And it's amazing, hey, the lesson's an hour, and you started with that one basic boring drill, the first 20 minutes of every lesson with, and Peter, he certainly would make a spoof of that, but also, many times putting you're going to be right in the middle of the court, and there's these big inners on the other side, and they're hitting balls, and they're hitting the coach. They're going, sorry. But, to feed the ball from the side and all the different ways to feed the ball, get down on one knee and just so many dynamic ways on feeding.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He was such a master with the racket too. I remember he would, like say kids have 5 of them, sit on the court.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe 7, 9 of them, but every position they would feed. Then you'd have a pro feed the ball to Peter, and then he'd make it a game where the ball would be fed to him, and he would know all the players' names, and he'd hit the volley right to the person no matter where they were sitting. They're just sitting on the court.
Mm-hmm.
And they had to catch it. So the kids, the challenge of catching the ball. But I just remember, we're going to do that. So we had a lab of 15 hours a week, and we would learn PBI drills and say, we got to practice these drills. With serving and volleying, you're going to serve, come in, and you're going to split step, but then when you hit the volley, you have to do a double hit on the volley.
Yeah.
So he brought athleticism into it. Can you keep that racket hit above your wrist? Can you stop the volley? So a double hit on the volley, stop on the forehand side, hit the ball to the backhand side, and just
send it over.
Very clever.
Yeah. Yeah. So many of the things that I took away initially, I think, was just how unaware I was of the racket face. And that's always what kind of stuck with me from working with him, from the index finger on the strings. It really kind of it boiled it down to a simple thing. And it's kind of shocking how ignorant I was of that kind of going into PBI.
We were talking about Ryan Reed. He does an outstanding job with 2-minute tennis. Mm-hmm. And I know Andy Fitzo will look at it, and he knows Vic so well. And I do as well. It's just the time I spent with him. Vic did not use the expression racket head awareness. For us, that's a Peter Burwash expression. So when we hear someone say this or that, he goes, Braden used to say power X on the serve. And Andy will go, no, he didn't. With serving backwards. There's many times where it's like we dedicated a podcast or two to the late Jim Verdick, team coaching, Redlands. But it was so powerful, we listened to his son Doug, and we talked about some things that we learned from Jim, and he said, he didn't do that when I played for him. But do you remember Peter having people serve backwards?
So I've heard you mention this on the podcast before. I don't recall this one, so I didn't see this.
Yeah, I mean it's so true, because young kids, when they serve, they want to put their hands out in front. Mm-hmm. And I mean, it's logical intelligent to serve palm up and just patty cake it, have the racket path go straight to the court, but teaching emergency shots, that was a theme of Peter.
Yep. Yeah, tennis is a game of emergencies.
So he didn't want people to run back. We call it the backfire, the Nastasi Bucharest backfire. Mm-hmm. And, you don't turn your shoulders, because if you turn to where the tennis court is, you know where the tennis court is, but if you turn now, your shoulders turn and the racket won't go towards the target. But then actually to practice that shot, and I remember Peter saying, we don't want anyone to go back and then, do this, or they have no idea how to retrieve. And when you're chasing a lob down, many times, we got the teenage showboats that they're going to try a tweener every time.
Yeah.
But you can go back and do the backfire where it's just, if you're right-handed, you're serving over your left side. Mm-hmm. But you have to have a continental grip.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That's the emergency shot. And I remember Peter showing up and saying, who's got a lousy forehand? And I raised my hand, because I started off where one grip sounded simple. And like everybody in my day, a lousy grip on the forehand. And, you remember he shifted my hand past the third panel. But it's true that every shot that's behind you, you need to play with a continental grip. Mm-hmm. So then with Peter, he had all these drills where you practice the emergency shots.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was a clinic theme. I remember that we would be told that would be, you could have an entire clinic just based on emergency shots. Every drill you do, start it off with an emergency shot and play it out from there. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's a negative for us is, especially through our Braden study, is to get kids hitting the ball really cleanly, that many times on a pie graph, we don't spend enough time on the emergency shots.
Yeah.
Now, ideas come from ideas. So with Peter, he loved mini tennis. We have mini tennis 1 through 5. And 1 is, so you start with the backfire.
Okay.
You Peter Burwash backward serve. And then you do double hits, which Burwash did all sorts of the double hit drills, not only off volleys, but off ground strokes. Yeah. So this idea that we have, I have to, go back to evolve from our training with Burwash is, okay, we're going to do mini tennis 5, double hits with a Hollywood twist. So the kids stop it, and then they cut the ball where the ball then bounces behind them.
Okay.
And then they get to practice, we'll call it the backhand flick, the forehand flick. They can do the side tweener, and they love it. But right away, okay, we're going to do double hits. We're going to drop hit balls in the alley. We're going to do partner drills, toss, hit, hold, really mechanical training because they're working on mechanics. But then the Burwash drills, so that's what I think is obviously I'm going to be a little biased over the GreatBase pathway to take ideas from all these people.
Yeah.
But I do think that Peter was very concept driven. Why don't you talk a little bit about like left hand awareness of the role of the left hand?
Yeah, I think PBI felt like you could pretty much teach every shot using your left hand. There was some involvement of the left hand, and it really was the left hand was just a way to kind of simplify it and control the racket face, because every shot's control. You're got to be racket face aware, and so that you really could use the left hand, whether it's unit turn on the volley and having the left hand up there to really set the face or whatever it was. So the left hand was just one of the things we constantly kind of went back to as a company. For my own game, kind of not having this, a real teaching background of being taught myself. It was, for me, it just really helped kind of set the racket angle and just, simplified a lot of my shots. And, it made me a better player just from the simplicity aspect and the racket face awareness. So.
No, like in this country, the USTA, the alphabet soup, the PTR, the USPTA is to take people who work for PBI and say, let's not lose this. Let's get these ideas on film and training young coaches. I tell people all the time, make it a story. Peter used to say, I haven't said take your racket back since 1964. And, I remember hearing that in the 70s and 80s. But make it a story. When I hear something that I really like, Jim Lair, I want to own that sucker. Repeat it, make it a story.
Yeah.
And I think that's why it's so important to give people credit where credit's due. 1, they deserve the credit, but 2, say, so-and-so taught me this. Yeah. This is where I was. And not be pretentious that, I invented the forehand. Peter was big on the triple vision. That would be a concept.
Yeah. Yeah, court awareness, ball awareness, and opponent awareness. So he just didn't, think that you could, you had to train yourself to be aware of all 3. So create as many drills as you could that really kind of put you in some uncomfortable situations. He really liked to have people facing away from the net, and he might say go, and then right as they turn around, they're getting a volley, and they don't know where the opponent's going to be on the other side. Stuff like that would just really kind of pull you out of your comfort zone.
A Peter Burwash drill was visual acuity. You're going to run around a cone, and as you run around the cone, before you make the turn, you feed the ball. And you think about it, that's a great way to try to have it become a half volley. You're going to the net. Okay, I don't want a high volley. I'd like to have a medium, perfect contact volley. The low volley's tougher. And then with the half volley, it's interesting. A lot of kids that are lazy with their feet end up having good half volleys.
That's true.
I always think of Bob Lutz, a great player. He'd be a little nonchalant coming in, and he's amazing, these pickups that you make at his feet. But how can I get people to practice that shot? How can I make that become a reality where they can do it over and over again?
Yeah. Well, with all the mini tennis we did, it always evolved into players being at defensive volley position right on the service line. So a lot of drills started right there. And, he would have us feeding right into their feet to start off, the movement, whether moving forward and stuff. So
Great on doubles.
Yep.
One to put those two words together, or mini tennis, compound word, I guess, and doubles. Peter would have people play mini tennis doubles in one service box.
Mm-hmm.
But if you play it in a very dynamic way, it's like not like, okay, you can with club players get two games going at once, putting 8 players on a court. Mm-hmm. But if they're really good, and it's amazing to see the footwork when they're playing in a confined space that they have to move even more. Mm-hmm. And they hear like a basketball floor, hear the shoes squeaking. With, what else comes to your mind that you'd want to share about Peter?
I think about just Peter as a person. I think a lot of the pros were intimidated, especially the new pros, when you kind of come in and you have that interview process and stuff. But I think the thing that you ultimately learn is you can call Peter anytime. We all had his phone number, and he would answer. So he just always was there as in a really active role and a supportive role. And that was the thing. It's like once you realized how much he cared and was on your side, he became it became a lot more comfortable. If you avoided Peter knew it, and he would make your life, tough. And he'd ask, why haven't you called me, or why haven't you done this or that? But if you kind of took some initiative, and Peter was a great guy in that way. That he really just cared about the company. You knew he was working harder than you were, so you never felt like he was taking it easy, and all the pros were out there just teaching lessons so he could make his percentage or something like that. It never felt that way. Yeah, no,
his energy level. He's the kind of guy that you would just be thinking, this guy does windows and floors. He'll do whatever it takes.
Yeah. That was always his kind of the inverted pyramid, where he would talk to us about, our job's to take care of the guests, and PBI headquarters job is to, do their best to take care of the pros. And, and it certainly had a family type of aspect to it, where you really kind of felt like you were, part of a group or part of a tribe. And that's why I think some people really loved it, and some people didn't care for it, because it just, it was kind of one of those things, all in, or you're out, you're halfway out the door, you're out the door kind of thing.
Yeah, for the CEOs and the presidents to hear that, the upside down triangle is, put the entry level pros at the top and make them feel that way.
Yeah. No, he was great. I was in Napa for the last part when I worked for PBI, and he was in Carmel, so there were some opportunities to come down and just see him a little bit more than maybe most of the other pros would, and stuff. And he was just always available and willing to talk.
And you actually went to India with him.
Yeah, I was really fortunate. I just worked out. It was probably one of either his last or second to last trip to India. India was kind of his spiritual home. That's kind of how he, I think, kind of, saw the world through some of the spiritual ideas, in India. And probably the neatest thing that he had done there is, as he had done his travels, he had met a guy who was feeding kids in the slums. They were just delivering meals, and he was really impressed with this gentleman, and they ended up starting a school exclusively for girls from the slums. And so he would raise money and go back to India every year and visit and kind of check in on them, and he would help connect them with doctors for cataracts for some of the families that were connected to the school and stuff. So it was it felt like one of his big life missions, throughout the years, and more connected to that.
Along those lines, obviously Peter was at 5-star hotels for the most part, but he's always connected with projects like teaching the blind, teaching wheelchair players, teaching the underprivileged. Why don't you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, even going right into the interview, that was one of the things that he would do in the interview, is he would blindfold somebody and ask them to, can you teach them? And we just kind of thought that was an interview technique, but it really was something that he was passionate about: wheelchair tennis, tennis for the blind. He did prison, taught tennis in the prisons, and he always said that was one of his favorite things to do.
I remember saying that.
But yeah, just in a lot of different areas, it was, I think, PBI's original mission was to bring tennis to, to every town and village. And it's, it's, I guess, tough to do that when you're in some of these exclusive places, but Peter's heart and a lot of the other people in the company really, did do these extra things that were far away from, being at a Ritz-Carlton or something like that.
And PBI was connected with a lot of federations.
Yeah. I know that, I don't know too much about that, but with, I know they were connected with India and sometimes with the BAT program that was out of there and at times. And
yeah, that's right. Britannica Arbitrage Tennis. One of our students, his father was the CEO of Nabisco. And I remember him coming into the office, this young guy. He goes, I'm really nervous. I said, what are you nervous about? You've been training for interviews backwards and forwards and upside down. He goes, well, part of my interviews I'm hitting with Rod Laver. And that's right, that Peter was part of that. Basically, that mission was to try to teach the families throughout India, how did Mrs. Armitage, who passed away not too long ago, how did she get her 3 children to be scholarly, worldly, and great tennis players at the same time? With, I think to take the core information that we have, basically is from Braden. We always say, okay, Vic Braden is the Christmas tree, and then there's all these other ornaments. But also, Peter Burwash was such a energetic, prolific speaker.
yes.
In every which way, but motivating groups. I remember, obviously some self-promotion because he loved the Toronto Maple Leafs, he wanted to speak to the Toronto Maple Leafs, and I remember he contacted my brother, who was the associate GM, but Ken Dryden was not that active as a president GM. And, my brother called up and said, hey, tell me about Peter Burwash. He wants to speak to Toronto Maple Leafs. And I said, 100% you should do it. But, the hockey guys, I think maybe it's, I know it's changed now, but it's like, no, open your doors. And you just think back in the 80s, this guy's going to show up with his little white tennis shorts talking to these hockey players. But Peter would always take his watch off. And something I do all the time is only a couple of you are still listening to me. Right now, I don't think any of you are listening to me. But Burwash would always do that.
Yeah. Yeah, he is a great speaker. I mean, we obviously heard him speak at the annual meetings, but and he would have these, 30-minute or, up to an hour talk, and he always did them with slides. He always had slides to have some sort of visual, whether it was technical, talking about the game itself, or he was giving leadership type talks. But really funny slides. I wish I had some of those because they really made you laugh. And you didn't think of Peter as this funny guy, especially when you started out in the company. But then you got to see him a little bit more, and you realize he's got a sense of humor.
But he's a great showman.
Yeah, no. When he talked at the USPTA conference a couple times, I was able to watch. I was thrilled because I didn't feel like people outside of our company got to see or hear and realize how dynamic and thoughtful and what a great speaker he was. So no, it was.
I know he's been in a long list of Hall of Fames, but I just hate to see Peter Burwash and all his contributions be forgotten. I really think that Peter Burwash should be in the International Tennis Hall of Fame.
Yeah, absolutely.
And what he did for tennis. Initially, I got into tennis in '74, around the clock, and but I don't know when it was. It was definitely sometime in the 80s where he was really welcomed with open arms and became a leader within the USPTA. For the longest time, Bill Tim was really the voice of the USPTA, and the organization grew, but they definitely had open doors for Peter.
Yeah,
he was always a headliner at their conferences.
Yeah, no, he was. I mean, that's kind of the thing when I think about the conferences. Like our PBI annual meeting was just unbelievable. That was really a great experience, not only just for him speaking, but the headquarters of PBI was really devoted. I mean, when you came to whatever location, whether it was in Austria or was in out at the Naples Grand or wherever the location was, they just had everything prepared, and it was very specific to you. Like I can remember one of the meetings. they would just have things. What are your weaknesses? What are we going to address this week that we have? And for me, it was like I had to learn to speak and smile more. So I had to like practice in front of a camera, and I don't know how much better I'm getting at that, but that was kind of the level of care and thought that went in. You felt like went into every single annual meeting, and it might be taking you out on court and working on your own game if they felt like you just needed to be able to demonstrate better and things like that. And the conference or the seminars were put on by the fellow pros, and whoever had the best site, whether it was programming or best at making contacts for future business development, it was always asking people within the company to really kind of to share their ideas, but then also collaborate within the group and the seminar itself.
Oh, in those training sessions you had, very clever. I do this all the time. Give a kid, okay, it's got to be a clean joke. You got to tell a clean joke, sing a song, tell a story. Mm-hmm. Say, we're going to do that at lunchtime. And, they just have such a fear. They have stage fright getting in front of a group of people. Yeah. And, come on, twinkle, twinkle, little star. Can't you sing the alphabet? I mean, just get through it. Where you were like, no, I'm not doing that. And they just, and you go, okay, I'm going to get this person to be on stage, playing for their team, and it's going to be 3-all. I know Andy Fitzell, who has done some acting, went to acting school. I've done a lot of camps with Andy. He's very, very good at improv and trying to get kids to come out of their shell. Yeah. But Peter was a master of that.
Yeah. I mean, one annual meeting, I remember they set up they had a studio set up for all of the pros to practice their media skills. And they would have the camera rolling, and they set it up on a live screen so the rest of the company would be watching your interview. So you knew somebody was going to be really watching when they put you up there on the couch to have a sit-down interview.
Now, for our listeners, 450 hours of training before you start to work, many, many places. And again, I come across as doom and gloom to be a negative. But actually, the truth is negative. Like, no, that we have, what do you mean we have no orientation? No, you just you hire somebody, they play a little college tennis, you give them a ball basket and say you go to court 12. But tell us a little about the annual meeting. That certainly must have cost the company money. I mean, where was that most of the time? Different cities, different countries?
Yeah, different locations. When I was there, it was either in Florida or it was in Austria. So Stangelwert, it's out by Kitzbühel. We would fly into Munich, and it's just in the Alps and the prettiest red clay courts you could imagine. And they would fly all 100 of us into the annual meeting, and it really was. I mean, culturally, I think for the company, it really kind of glued everybody because you got to put faces, to the newsletters you've been reading for the past year, and there's always probably 8 to 15 new pros that were joining every year. So it was just a way to kind of connect everybody, and it was just special. One
thing that the GreatBase, we certainly didn't start out with the organization, the long-term vision, but we have a network, and we should have an annual get-together for sure.
Yeah.
Dan Obashan was with PBI forever, high-energy guy, and I remember him telling me once about the annual show. I didn't say anything. I do sometimes remain politically correct. I won't say anything here. But he said they were going to have a debate, and his job was to study Vic Braden backwards and forwards, read his book, look at his tapes, and I'm going, gee, I'd like to have that challenge, and to have Peter question the Vic Braden method. But he did that in a very open mind. He wanted to learn and challenge his coaches, and it was not a matter of saying, well, this is wrong, but let's just take Vic's contributions, let's try to turn it upside down, inside out, and talk about it and put it out there like it's a debate. Do we agree with this, disagree with this? And I know from that training, what I would do with the students I trained, and people need more and more time to train. You can't be an overnight tennis teacher. So I would debate my students, and I would take the side, for example, no, you never teach someone to change grips. I don't care if they're 7. You teach them to volley with a continental grip from the very beginning. Yeah. And just make it confrontational, because when people get out there in the tennis teaching field, it really is confrontational. And I've trained so many people that don't play well. And the macho male ego, It's amazing. These young people come out of college tennis, and maybe they didn't even make the lineup, they didn't get their degree, and they end up making so much money per hour because they're a glorified hitting partner.
Yeah.
As we always talk about in boxing, the sparring partner wears a helmet and a mouth guard, they don't say anything. But it's overnight, okay, you can hit the ball, and mom and dad are looking for a shortcut, and they're going to hire somebody who can bang the ball to their kid. Mm-hmm. It was great that Peter had that playing background, and he saw way beyond that. Mm-hmm. Just like so many, like a Welby Van Horn, that your playing background was just a bonus.
Yeah. Oh, I think that's kind of, I have to be grateful because I certainly didn't have the background, I think, to go become, tennis director or head pro at some of the places I did. But, they told me that from the beginning. They said, you don't need to play well. We can teach you how to play. You just need to be teachable, and really be willing to learn. And I think they saw that somewhat as a bonus because they weren't, fighting, previous tennis lessons and all that kind of stuff, or just your own experience of maybe teaching incorrectly.
So when you got into PBI, they had moved from Honolulu to Houston as their headquarters?
Peter was in Carmel already, and they had already been in the Woodlands in Texas for a little while.
And PBI had a no drinking policy. The joke was that the PBI pros in Honolulu, they're all drinking fermented pineapples. Tell us a little bit about that.
It was a strict rule. I think a lot of it came out of Peter's kind of time period, the drug culture of maybe the 60s and the 70s, and Peter wanted to set the company apart. So, and he just felt like there was a duty to not be drunk around your students, or not, to really just kind of maintain a professional line. And so I think that's where that kind of came from. And, certainly being at some of these resorts and stuff where there is a ton of opportunities to party and drink, I think they felt like it was a necessary thing and so forth. So,
well, in the 80s in America, cocaine was everywhere.
Yeah.
Teaching pros. Thankfully, I grew up where jockocracy is, how'd it go? This prep school I went to, I wish I was a 4th-floor rowdy, and everyone would be afraid of me. It's from a commercial. Oscar the hot dog? Oscar Weiner. Meyer Wiener, there you go. But there's no drinking, but then also, I think it may have been Peter's second book. It was Tennis for Life, and then the second book was on being a vegetarian, I think.
Yeah. Peter certainly felt like vegetarianism was the healthiest way, and shared it with everybody. It was never forced or anything like that, But yeah, he was pretty passionate about that, and felt like it was the ethical way to live life and the healthier way. So.
Oh, I remember being a nervous young guy in my 20s, and I'm hosting Peter Burwash, and it's like. And it was with Mike Carter, who he had on as a guest, fun guy. And, we just had so much respect. Peter Burwash is coming to hang out with us. And where are we going to take this guy to eat? And we took him to Dairy Queen the first day, and it was, he had a milkshake both times. It's like, okay, there's no red meat in that milkshake. But, yeah. But his energy level, nonstop.
Yeah. Yeah. He was nonstop when I think, one of the funniest memories I have is, picking up Peter at the USPTA conference to take him to the airport. I think he was flying to India or something. And, we're in the middle of Manhattan, me and, my colleague, Mike Manzella, and we're lost. We can't find our way to get out of the city. And we're looking at our GPS stopped working because the buildings were too tall. And we're trying to navigate. And Peter's in the back just saying, well, what's your next question for me? It just never stopped. He was always, trying to connect and, wanting to kind of educate us and get us a little sharper and stuff like that. So,
yeah. And also, too, around hotel executives.
Yeah.
It's not just tennis pros among tennis pros.
Yeah.
With Peter, for me, like the forehand, he was ahead of his time. He figured out early on that people shouldn't have a continental grip on the forehand.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, the way he taught the left hand was you don't have to be attached to a grip. You just need to find the right racket angle. So he would always encourage us to kind of, move the racket in the hand with the left hand and let the grip, be what it will be as long as the racket angle feels, right. And it makes sense for where it's pointing.
Yeah.
That's kind of more of how he kind of taught it.
No, I always remember I went to a Vic Braden course first time, and 6 months later, you were asking me about that just earlier today, and go back the second time. And it was just one other guy who had been there the 6 months before. The two of us were repeaters. I mean, there were 70 people easily. So this guy was very aggressive, and next thing he's just out there in front, and Vic's giving him a lesson, and he had a open racket face on the backhand, didn't have a backhand grip, which Braden, the person, taught on the right side of number one. Braden, the resource, when he'd be on ESPN, grip on one, but he really taught it on the right side of one. But I remember raising my hand and I said, well, why aren't you telling him to change his grip?
Yeah.
And Vic goes, I'm not a toad. He was here 6 months ago. I told him 6 months ago to change his grip, but he hasn't done it.
Yeah.
And, that's where Vic was way better than me, is I would have said, hey, that's for me, Braden, Steve, I was always flattered, we should have worked together. Of course, he would say we should have been teaching ISTPs and ESTPs on the brain typing. And I said, Vic, we should have worked together training coaches, and you go forward with a flashlight, and I go backwards taking a club and hitting people over their head. Did you get that? Do you understand? But yeah, Peter, I remember, I'm just thinking, if someone had taught me that earlier, to close the racket face with, how many years were you with PBI?
Almost 10. So
wow.
10. So I worked at a few sites that we did the training in Georgia, and then out in Naples, and I was at the Lake George Club in New York. And then the last place I was at for a while was Silverado Resort and Spa in Napa. So a few different sites, and got to do some fun little side trips out to Austria, and taught a little bit in Hawaii and things like that. But yeah, it was great. I had a pretty small short list compared to a lot of the pros in the company.
Oh, the different places, different continents. We can go back and catch up and, okay, what did you do post-PBI? But with PBI was sold, why don't you talk to us about that?
Yeah, I don't know a ton, but I think it's been in the last year or so. Troon now owns PBI, and I think Troon owns Drysdale now and PBI. So I think they've kind of got their different brands. And, Renee Zondag's been the acting president for probably maybe going on 10 years. It might be a little bit less than that, but so he's still there. And, Renee was very close with Peter, and Peter definitely kind of had mentored him to take over the company, and so. And
where's Renee from?
Oh, I'm trying to think of his last name is Zondag, so do with that what you will. But he's over there, and I want to say he's Dutch, but he was in Dubai for a long time with PBI. And
you're saying that he was very good friends with Federer.
Yeah, it was kind of cool. He doesn't like to share that, but yeah, he's. Sorry. Sorry, Renee. But anyways, he's a very humble guy, and so he doesn't like to draw attention. But yeah, he was in Dubai for years, and Federer would train there, and so yeah, I think they've struck up quite a friendship.
Yeah, we're certainly on the outskirts, but the CEO of Troon was here this summer with his daughter, and she was sent by somebody that we've influenced, who's coaching the college tennis team, and I know that. It's not only PBI, but it's also they bought Drysdale. They're still operating under the name Drysdale.
I believe so. Yeah.
So do the hotels that have PBI, is it still a PBI name?
Yeah. If you go on their PBI's website, they've still got their list of properties. So I think they're using them for different types of branding for depending on the property. I would imagine. So.
So post PBI, what did you do?
Well, I kind of had an injury that lingered for a couple of years in my right elbow, and I pitched throwing a lot of baseballs, and so kind of ended up having Tommy John surgery, and it just took me a long time to recover, and I didn't think I was going to. So I ended up in Utah where I had some family, and slowly, about a year or so after I moved out there, my arm just healed. And so one kid found out I used to teach tennis, and then that turned into two, and now it's about 85 kids that I just run a private junior program. And so I've been doing that for about the last 3.5, 4 years out in Utah. So,
and you're working on building a tennis facility.
Yeah, that's right.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so we're myself and a couple partners, parents of kids that I've coached. We're working on building a 5-court indoor facility. We're trying to put a couple clay courts in as well. We got a hold of a German red clay manufacturer. They're called Red Clay Pro, and they do a special kind of clay. It's a special type of base. If you think of the tracks that they're putting out, those rubberized tracks, they're actually able to take the clay base and put some sort of chemical on it, and it sets the base, and the base can't be dug into or moved, so you don't have to water it.
I've just read about it. I know little or nothing about it.
So anyway, we're gonna attempt to put a couple clay courts out there, which is a little unusual for Utah, and yeah, we're gonna have it go.
But clay courts, so you don't really have to hydrate.
Yeah, there's no watering in terms of soaking them. You do a little bit of just a light mist when you want to play, but there's no rolling, no raking. So we're going to give those a go.
And that's going to be indoors?
No, the clay courts will be outdoors, but the hard courts are going to be indoors. So.
And what about losing the topping with wind? Would that be really costly?
Well, that's what we're going to find out a little bit. We went to there's one of these courts is at a private home in Vegas, so which they've got pretty similar wind patterns to what we've kind of seen in Utah, and they did pretty well their first year in terms of not breaking the bank for topping and so forth. So it's going to be an experiment and figuring this out as we go.
Back to Peter, he'd be a guy to ask, what was it like to play on cow dung? I mean, tennis courts are made out of so many different surfaces. I know in Germany, the Germans are way ahead of the curve when it comes down to advanced technology. But yeah, I remember being in many indoor halls where they had the rubberized.
Yes.
You felt it was played like clay. Mm-hmm. Not by any means. I don't think anybody's done a great job with the artificial grass, but the artificial clays. I mean, I found it to be very playable. But yeah, if it's just regular clay indoors, it just becomes a mess.
Yeah, exactly.
And just juniors? You don't work with adults?
I work with some of the parents of the juniors. It's going to be, we're going to have to kind of build that program up, which is what I did with PBI. I was 95% all adult programming and that aspect. So that certainly will be part of kind of growing the whole operation.
My comment would be hats off to country club pros who are running league teams.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But no, I like the idea for an adult to train like a junior.
Yeah, I've heard you say that before, and that sounds more and more attractive to just putting everybody in the same program. Let them.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like say in Japan, adults come on a court and they jog and stretch, and they do the calisthenics. And I one time was doing an adult clinic and kind of forgot for a second. Said, "All right, everybody run a couple laps," and everybody just started staring at me. I go, "Oh, okay." Adults don't stretch.
Yeah.
With timeline and the costs and
we're hoping to get those lower, but we're hoping for next winter. That's our goal. And right now, with how things are with the economy and stuff, we got to be smart. But yeah, the goal is still to try to hit next winter. So
I've heard Vandermeer say, and I was only in that position one time. All my years in tennis is where you own your own courts. Mm-hmm. A lot of positives in owning your own courts.
Yeah, absolutely.
But with that, you'll have a different type of overhead.
Yes, an indoor overhead. So
heating, lighting, space. And in Utah, how about the AC bill? Won't be that bad. I mean, is there?
Apparently, I don't know that many of the clubs actually AC indoors in Utah. If the paneling and things that they're supposed to be using these days is supposed to keep it pretty cool.
That was my next question. Is there anything very unique like where you can open it and close it on the sides?
Yeah, it's kind of we're in a valley that's pretty rural in terms of its look. They kind of try to keep that, so it'll have a little bit of a bucolic kind of farm type of a look, but with the roll-ups on the sides and kind of things where we're at. So,
and you have land for expansion?
We got a little bit. We can add a couple of courts. So yeah, not too much though. It was tough to find land, and Utah's booming, so it's gotten tougher and tougher find land where people still are, where people are. So,
And the zoning, commercial zoned, and
yeah, we got a deal through the city, so they're going to let us have a special permit to do athletics in this area.
most places, the zoning laws are a little bit lighter for camps. This is what you could do in the summer,
Yeah.
but you can't necessarily do it year round. But I do think that because of the Intermountain and tennis kids, knowing tennis kids, everybody's, you go to tournaments in the Intermountain. I mean, from, Las Vegas to Denver to Salt Lake. I mean, everything's so far away, but it would be nice if you could have, and I've seen that, the bunkhouse, the place in your facility where you could easily sleep kids. But, that's one thing too, is that you can just get an air mattress and a sleeping bag.
Yeah, out on the courts.
Yeah, and it's the best way to supervise players. The girls go to the right, boys go to the left. The girls got their own locker room, boys have their own locker room. People on this podcast heard me say then when you say, okay, lights out, they're all sleeping with their phone. It looks like a Christmas tree.
Yeah.
No, that's exciting. Now, tell us about you connected with us by going through the Peter Burwash podcast. We dedicated podcast to our pillars, and then that led you to study what we've put together. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, I mean, it kind of when Peter was getting a little bit in worse health and stuff, and just being out of the company for a few years, I was really just, with podcasts these days, I just thought, I wonder if anybody's done anything on Peter. Has anybody put together anything on his life? And I think the GreatBase was the only podcast, at least on the podcast front, that really had anything on Peter. And I was shocked to see that it was, more than 3 hours of content and stuff. And when I listened to it, I think it just was clear to me that you knew Peter. And so that really impressed me, that you were able to capture Peter, you knew Peter. And then when I heard that, you referred to Peter, I think, as a pillar, and that just kind of made me say, well, I need to know more. Who are these other pillars? If this guy gets Peter, he's got to have some understanding, so he's whoever else he would put as a pillar. And when I heard you refer to Vic as the Christmas tree, well, I just decided I needed to spend some time, studying the content, and that just kind of rolled from there.
Actually, we want to have a podcast. I never was on Nick Baltieri's payroll, but, around Nick in so many different ways. He, certainly hired coaches. I have many stories connected to Nick. We have to get around to doing that. I also would like to, maybe we'll do that this summer, is take 8 days in a row, watch Rocky movies, and then have a podcast on Rocky. But for me, actually, with Peter Burwash, I didn't even go to the library. I have his books, I have tapes, I have notes, but that's just how powerful. I mean, these podcasts we need to do a better job. We're amateurs, and say, okay, and it's not. Who's the guy, the famous guy? He's got a podcast that we listen to. Joe.
Oh, Rogan?
Joe Rogan.
Yeah.
So, I think Joe Rogan has a little larger support staff for his podcast than we do. And, we're doing this and doing that. It's like, okay, we want to keep this going. And with that would be fun to have, podcasts on, more in depth.
Yeah.
But then also to say, okay, with Peter, and that's this type of thing that these leading organizations that certainly have some funds, maybe they could have some more funds. That's something that we need to do with our GreatBase and nonprofit, is raise funds. But wouldn't it be nice to just have, like the old days with encyclopedias, obviously now it would all be online, but to Peter Burwash drills.
Yeah.
And so then it's not someone, to give people credit. Like a great Peter Burwash drill is, you can do it on a field. We have it online. I'm in South Africa, and I'm doing it with a group of South African kids. Mm-hmm. Petrus Kukimori changed how he pronounces his name. So I was, along with his wife, I'm their guest, doing a camp in South Africa. So you get all these kids sitting in a circle. And Jeff Coetzee was amazing at it, this young player who's had a very successful playing career. Now he's doing very well coaching. And you put one person in the middle, mm-hmm. and then say put 6 people around that person. You can do it on a tennis court, but I remember training the women at the University of Illinois Labor Day camp. And my job for the coach at that time was to come in and, okay, let's set the season straight. And my job was that, okay, we would do it on a field, and every girl, their warm-up was going to have grass stains and mud stains, and they were going to get dirty, and it would be. But the person in the middle had to actually sit down, and they just had to be like Peter was as a player, very acrobatic, and it was just a fun drill. So to get a visual on that, person's in the center, and you just initially they have to volley in order around the people at the outside, and then people on the outside say, okay, you got to do a knee touch volley on both sides until it comes back around to you. And then you get the person in the middle, they actually have to hit the volley and fall down on their fanny and keep the ball going. And, they're just so many things. But coming back to, but you've gone through the courses and, why don't you touch upon that?
Yeah, I think, I just started off listening to the podcast and just kind of started going through the pillars. And, I think for me, coming out of PBI, I think simplified my game and a lot of the thoughts of, just how to teach. And I gained a lot from that. And, leaving PBI, I think you're always, I still love teaching, obviously, and kind of had started teaching juniors. And I just was, getting into a little bit more of a junior development type player that I hadn't worked with a lot in PBI. So I, trying to kind of search and find what is the best information out there. And, and I think when I came across the GreatBase, it just really closed a lot of gaps in what I would say the tennis math, the Braden math was just so, when I heard kind of, 19.6 degrees and the dimensions of the court, no unique opinion. I think when I heard all that stuff, it in some ways it went back to Peter because it was simple and it made so much logical sense. And for me, it just really helped my own game, which was the experience I had when I was in PBI. My game got better. The Braden information made my own game better. And then if it's going to make my game better, I know it's going to translate to the kids because I've felt it, And so, yeah, the GreatBase has just really, I think, closed a lot of questions or, cleared up a lot of teaching, maybe misconceptions and things like that. And I think the other thing, the way I think of the GreatBase and Braden really is just, it's such a simple blueprint, but once you see the blueprint, everything really becomes, simple. Like there's just, you don't look at slow-mo video again and go after the wrong thing, so to say, that'd be an example.
Here's a Peter Burwash. The art is where you start.
Yes, that's still.
And, being able to recognize a primary flaw.
Yep.
And that is something that where you told me today something I heard before, but I haven't heard in a long time. Why don't you say that about, I think it was one of the PBI pros, about people hitting in the alley? Oh,
yeah. It's a John Weston quote. I don't know where he got it from, but he would always say, the alley's fool's gold, ladies. Don't cover the alley. It's fool's gold.
That's a great line. And that's what people need to do is have all those buzzwords and phrases where you just can explain your sport better. Mm-hmm. Because we were watching four teenagers play mixed doubles, and they're always trying to go down the line.
Yeah.
You make the person look like a donut. Go forward. Excuse me. Peter used to say, fast feet and slow racket. He certainly would talk about control, and then people would just hear a tidbit and go, "No, he's all wrong. It's all racket at speed."
Yeah.
Oh no, you got to be aggressive. But to get people to be able to rally. Yep. Peter, I thought this was great. And I think it comes from his hockey background, where when you're warming up with someone, he'd be able to hit the ground stroke on their forehand volley and be able to hit the ground stroke on their backhand volley. Mm-hmm. Give yourself a target, and then also the two-shot passing. I mean, he played the game. He understood the game.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Tennis for Life had so many good concepts and things.
With Peter, the pros, what about the differences from one pro to the next? I mean, were you being original? Would people go in and kind of be, say for example, I used to like to train pros where make them a floater. So if he has a staff, a facility, I should say, requires a multiple number of pros.
Mm-hmm.
You were trained to do everything. It wasn't like you were going to be one-dimensional and you just taught juniors and...
Yeah, no, we were trying to teach everything. It turned into a lot of adult teaching, but some of our sites had huge junior programs, and they really were player development and so forth. But yeah, I mean, Peter really stressed that somebody should be able to take, a lesson in Dubai, and then they should be able, to go to Lake George and really not hear a different language. Like it should be, similar in some continuity between the pros. And they had a database where we entered in all the students' names, and you would take notes on your lessons, and then the next pro could pull, if they went to a different site, PBI site on vacation, you pull them up and try to have an idea of what they were working on, or kind of
talk a little bit about time frame. So what you're doing now is you have long-term students. You have 85 juniors, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So at a hotel, you're gonna have somebody for short weekend, long weekend,
a week at the most.
a week.
Yeah, it was just, I think that's where Peter's kind of the teaching concepts. When you go into Braden, it's, it's maybe a little bit more in depth in some ways and long term. But I think Peter, with a lot of hotel guests, it was what can you accomplish in a few hours? Always starting off the lesson with, getting, feedback from the student, and then hitting. And before you give you want to go out and watch the student hit before you give any feedback. You don't want to influence them or anything. And then, you'd bring it in and kind of go through some progressions. They were big on progression. So always finding a simple way to progress to get to the back of the court, hopefully by the end of the lesson, and ending on a high. Fun, fitness, knowledge was kind of the three things. And some hotel guests, you're just going to play sets, and that's all they want to do. And it just varied from each guest how serious of a student they were. And it was fun because it was a lot of different people coming in, and a lot of chances to practice on different people and just see different, strokes.
Did you ever have a chance to listen to Peter as a commentator on TV?
One annual meeting they had, Jeff Hankelman, who's still with PBI. He had been able to record some of his Canadian broadcasting or Toronto broadcasting, and so I've heard a little bit of it, but haven't been able to find much.
We used to always call the 3 E's of tennis lesson, and you have to camouflage one of the 3. Education, which you got to be able to hide the lesson. Peter would say, he had a great line. Well, the personality of the pro, the pro has to make this work.
Yeah.
Because obviously teaching technique is kind of like watching paint dry. Embrace the boredom. So it's education, it's exercise, and you say enjoyment or entertainment.
Yeah.
But I believe Peter had 3 E's where one was obviously emergency, one was execution, and then one was exploitation. But I remember TSN, he would do the Canadian Open. I remember talking to him at the Canadian Open, but Carlene Bassett, who I got to know because she had an academy, she owned the academy. And Dave Anderson, we talk about quite a bit. We worked there. But I remember him saying about exploitation, and what we used to say years ago, people would play, and the way they would play, we would say that doesn't work in the 18s. That when they get older, that won't work.
Yeah.
Where they just play one-dimensional tennis.
Yeah.
But I remember, Peter saying, well, they don't have the skills to exploit the player because they won't go forward.
Yeah. Yeah, he was huge on coming forward in net. Constantly getting us to stress, serve and volley tennis. So he was always, just pushing forward on the court. Yeah.
No, I thought he was an excellent commentator, but he got pushed out. Perhaps I shouldn't say that, but I'm going to guess that he got pushed out. That he loved doing it. He was great at it. Mm-hmm. And then, who else is doing it? Braden, obviously, I think too many times we come across as hero worship and people think that we're one-dimensional and it's just pro Braden. But Vic actually got pushed out too.
Huh.
And, I think actually with Vic, I just don't think it was managed well to bring science into it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Or you could look back and go, hey, why don't we have this segment where it's just the facts, Jack? Mm-hmm. And to take time and space away from someone, if someone's got a hole in their game, how can you attack it from more than just one part of the court?
Yeah. Yeah. The dimensions of the court. I mean, like, just such a powerful tool. I can't stop coming back to it.
Well, I think of Peter with the Bryan brothers. I think you said you saw them at an exhibition just yesterday.
Yeah, playing the Jensen brothers.
Well, the Jensen brothers as well. There's some energy. There's some entertainers.
Yeah.
But that's what Peter was. I mean, he could entertain. But I just think these tennis teachers from days gone by is that we need to save the lost arts.
Yeah.
Peter Burwash, for me, again, getting 4 players to play doubles in a service box. Listeners, you got to try that. Can't hit the ball hard, and you can't poach on the first ball. You serve, return has to go by the opponent at the net. So you have to 1, 2, 3, then play it out.
Yeah.
And then you're so close, you have to really start to develop really good hands. Peter was certainly someone who, the pitfalls, when that ball comes right at you, that you're going to play a backhand volley, that you're not going to
Slide around.
play the forehand volley. But with the doubles, Peter was big on one bounce doubles.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, Peter was always, every drill I think he could get people into, come to the net, he was always pushing that on us to work with people to develop the volley and things like that.
With pushing, let me say this is good. This is a good time to say this, is that Peter in doubles, what he would do is stand behind the server, put their racket in their back, and push them to the net like it was a pitchfork.
Yeah, I can always remember Peter, whether it was the volley, if the racket face was too open, he'd be standing by them and he'd catch the racket, real dynamically in front of the demo. I think the thing that I always appreciated about Peter's teaching, at least from our annual meeting perspective, was he always brought out, 3-0 ladies, 3-5 ladies, 4-0 men, 3-5 men. I think I got soured on some of the tennis conferences because it was consistently always high performance being demoed for a coach to bring out high performance kids, and he was always willing to bring out just very regular level players, and show us how he would approach and work on their forehand, what the flaw he's seen and how he's going to attack it. And he just gained a ton of, I think, respect in all of the pros' eyes, because he was never putting himself in the teaching situation to make himself look great or make it easy on himself. He was going to do exactly what he was, asking us to do. So,
well, I think also too is that it wasn't going to be boring. If he was going to get people to rally.
Yeah.
And players are not going to be perfect. Here's a Burwash point to make a point, is tossing the ball too far over your head.
Mm-hmm.
And I can remember there's a person who's a very good player. She would say past tense, present, you can guess, is he's on the board of governors with the USTA. And my youngest son might have been 11, young guy. And I go, all right, this is what we're going to do. And I said, all right, Connor, stand in the service box and see if you can catch this player's serve off the bounce. And, that's another thing too, is Peter was huge on the contact point.
Yeah.
Just huge on the contact. Where are you hitting the ball?
Mm-hmm.
And then when you rally, to breathe out, but be able to say where you're hitting the ball.
Yep.
Are you, obviously one word was early, one word was late.
Yep.
I'd have to stop and rack my brain, but the three of them.
Yeah.
How are you hitting the ball when you're rallying? And this would be a PBI drill. It's so basic, but waist, it could be medium, low, medium, high. So many kids back up and they don't know. I mean, a vast majority of juniors, they're hitting the ball. You watched us do a video today, and the kid's hitting the ball. That forehand side, he's backing up. He's running everywhere to hit a forehand, and the ball every time is at shoulder level when he's hitting it.
Yeah.
And it's like, where are you going? What are you doing? But be able to just to be able to have a bag of tricks where you can correct that problem so many different ways.
Yeah, I think he always had the 5 dimensions of the strokes as well, which, power, spin, speed, direction, depth. And so, then you throw in concepts like defense, neutral, and offense. It was like, okay, you're going to play nothing but underspin, but you're going to call out, whether you're in defense, neutral, or offense. And then, always looking as your shot selection matching what you're calling out. You're calling defense, but your swing speed just, went through the roof. So there was a lot of good, I think, maybe frameworks or concepts to kind of build and always be able to go and teach off of. If you pick out those 5 things, you can then find variations within those things you can just kind of keep building off of. And that was really good, just easy ways to teach.
Now it's since the 80s. I mean, it's 40 some years. So we had what we call the 7 concepts. Mm-hmm. We could make it 8, we could make it 77, but we 7. We call it the emotional anchors. Mm-hmm. And we know we've had some players add to it and they publish it, and that's fine. I mean, I can name a few people that I think they could be slapped on the wrist for loyalty. They work for Peter, and you read their bio, and it's like, well, how did you end up speaking 3 languages? How did you end up traveling to so many countries? It should say somewhere in your bio that you work for PBI. Mm-hmm. But the 3 zones of the court, from red zone, yellow zone, green zone, but in the back of the court, that's when we use DNO. Mm-hmm. That comes way back from those notebooks from Camp Manitowoc. Mm-hmm. And I'm telling you, I mean, you saw it today, watching a young kid play, and it was over and over and over again.
Yeah,
he's moving back to the defensive area of the red zone to hit a forehand. As he moves back, then the ball bounces up higher.
Yep.
And say, okay, you can't back up now. You have to stay inside, over here. And then, okay, create a game to that. And then also create peer pressure. Mm-hmm. We're going to create teams, and anytime. So that's how Peter's mind would work. I mean, and I think fast thinker, think on your feet, and used to challenge, as we said, people to think on their feet. So you have 4 courts playing, and they're teams, and you blow the whistle. Anytime a kid runs around their backhand in the neutral or defensive area of the red zone, you blow the whistle, and the person everybody on your team, right there, Johnny on the spot, you lose the point where the whistle blew, and then you lose one more point.
Yeah.
And it's like, how can we get these people to change?
Yeah.
How can we make it work?
Yeah. Well, as you said today, it's one thing if you're, top 10 in the world and your game is, pretty set, but if you're developing, you have, no business running around your backhand, and then we talked about Jeff Lewis has that great post on Instagram, which is Djokovic, inside the baseline hitting the backhand, and everyone else is outside the doubles alley hitting a forehand, and the Australian.
No, our listeners should listen to Jeff. Great communicator. I'm not sure exactly what he has and doesn't have on YouTube, but that would be just like someone like Ryan Reedy, that he got a chance to spend time one-on-one with Vic Braden, and obviously loves Vic Braden, admires Vic Braden. But someone like Jeff, just like Andy Fitzell, who did a great job getting us going with this podcast. I was the yap guy. In fact, that's something I don't really like about these podcasts. We get positive feedback, so I guess I'm going to just keep going like this. That Andy had just worked for one of the pillars, but he spent so much time around. But the thing about Andy is that he knows what comes from Braden.
Yeah.
And then has the intellectual curiosity. Well, where did that come from? Where did that come from? And it's not like we can pinpoint everything, and there's a big overlap.
Yeah. But
with Jeff, for sure, he spent so much time with us, is that he's teaching Peter Burwash concepts. He just is, because if you spent that much time with us, but it's why don't you explain the graphic and how he does that?
It's Djokovic. That's what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just a funny picture of Djokovic. It's a little stick figure drawn, and it just says Djokovic, and he's inside the baseline, and he's hitting the backhand. And then there's this other stick figure way off the court. It might say everyone else. And, they're obviously hitting a forehand, but, they're 5 feet outside the baseline, and the point's pretty obvious. So it's, and I think he says at the bottom, I hate the inside out, or I hate running around the backhand, or something like that, or the inside out forehand's overrated. I don't know what he says exactly, but it's just captures the point.
Yeah, the inside out forehand. We can talk about that. But here's a Burwash drill that I don't do anymore. It's too bad. Is Peter would say, okay, we're going to play, and all you can do is hit a forehand.
Yeah.
Get away from it, give yourself space. And, Peter was clever enough to say, okay, like Braden didn't like people hitting forehands across the baseline going this way. Mm-hmm. Is Vic said, well, if you're going to do at least hit forehands going the other way, so you learn to get away from the ball. Mm-hmm. But we have a player that you watch today. He's quite good. He's knocking on the door to be a 12-0. He could be better. He's got, another year before he's going to go to college. But I heard him say the other day, well, my inside-in forehand. And that's a language, that's part, we don't use that language. And it's out there. Inside out used to be a technical term, which means swing from close to away. Courier was number one in the world. I mean, that's obviously big time. And at one time, his company, maybe it still is named Inside Out. And everybody's hitting an inside out forehand. And it's almost like they're waving their arms, go, I don't come to the net.
Yeah.
And they're going for the $100 shot from the 10-cent position. But the players we work with, I think 99% for sure, they don't understand that we teach the DNO, the Burwash concept of getting inside the court to run around your backhand. That's another option.
Yeah.
I watched one of our players played a great match the other day. He lost first set 6-love, but he's really competitive. It was a really competitive first set. He lost 6-love. People get confused by that.
Yeah.
And he wins the next set, and then unfortunately flip a coin. They have to play the match tiebreaker. But is step up into the court. Now, when we say that, it doesn't mean to hit off your front foot. We spent a lot of time with a young coach, Matt Clore, we talk about quite often. I'm sure that comes from his father. Step up into the court. That doesn't mean attack the net.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that you're going to hit off your front foot. What it means is your opponent moves back, and you just know, based on your previous shot and their movement, recognition skills. That's a Burwash term, recognition skills.
Yeah.
I'll say that over and over again, your reading skills. But when they back up, that you know that you can move just inside the baseline. You don't have to run around it. You're just hitting the ball inside the baseline. And because you got them to move back, the ball's going to bounce up high. It's going to be above their shoulder. They may end up in a deep shot. You might not be as confident, especially a young 15-year-old player, to take the ball out of the air. But you're going to step in and play the ball on the rise.
Yeah.
And that's, the Peter Burwash, the clapping of the hands, bounce hit. You take a Galloway's tip.
Yeah.
And, that's where we're all connected when it comes to communication.
Yeah.
And that's what's so great about the Super Bowl being played yesterday. And everybody is saying so many great things about Andy Reid. And Bill Walsh, I heard that 75% of the head coaches, their football tree, coaching tree can be traced back to Walsh.
Yeah, I think I've read that.
Then they interview Saban, and the quarterback for the Eagles, Jalen Hurts. He was a superstar for Alabama. Then he became the number 2. He loves Alabama. Became the number 2, and they sent him to Oklahoma.
Yeah.
Or he transferred to Oklahoma.
Yeah.
But the football community, the studying of film. People that listen to our podcast heard it over and over again. It's law in American football, high school. You send us your film, we'll send you our film.
Yep.
Bum Phillips said about Don Shula, he'll take yours, and he did it with a country-fied accent. He'll take his and beat yours, and then he could take yours and beat his. But that's one thing people, and I think there's too much self-promotion in tennis. I don't think many people are proud of their coaching tree. Like where are you studying? Where you trained? And but the football community, they learn so much from each other, and But Peter, you just think about how many different hats he wore. But it wasn't. He certainly would say, don't be a one-dimensional player, but he certainly challenged himself in so many areas of tennis.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. He, could be the briefcase pro, but he could be he put his time in the trenches, and you could just see that from when he got on court with people, that he never let himself get disconnected from being on the court. So.
Yeah, no, I've told many people that I've trained that they're now coaching college tennis. Mm-hmm. Never, ever stop teaching beginners.
Yeah.
Never, ever stop teaching beginners. I know some highly acclaimed coaches that have been involved in different federations and such, and they don't teach beginners. They refuse to teach beginners. I know some tough coaches that go, no, I just can't talk to the little kids. I just can't, they just can't change gears and lower the volume and present tennis in a different manner.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
With just tell us, crystal ball in this business. What are you shooting to accomplish with your business in Utah?
Well, I think the goal is to grow the game. I think and produce people that can hit the ball well. I mean, I think that's one of the fun things about Utah. There's a lot of kids there, and tennis is popular. I mean, some of these junior highs might have 40 kids on their junior high team. So the game is it's healthy there, but it needs better teaching. And so, and as I think you've said it might be Braden that says it's like frustration will set in pretty quickly if you don't have good information, right? And, getting better is part of being able to improve is part of the path to sticking with playing. And so that's kind of, I think it's been somewhat of your influence on me is just really trying to develop players no matter the athletic ability. I think oftentimes it's easy to get caught up in training the athletes, but I mean, it really is a lot of pride to get anybody, somebody that doesn't have that athletic background to start really, hitting the ball, true topspin off both sides and those kind of things.
Yeah, like today, I mean, we had a little young 10-year-old rallying with a 7-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
And, you just watch them and they both, I think elegance is a pretty strong word, but that's the Braden word about Federer.
Yeah.
But effortless, efficient,
mm-hmm.
that they can rally a ball back and forth.
Yep.
And not rushing the competitive process.
Yeah.
Like, I think so many tennis people are going in circles.
Yeah.
You don't have to go to every tournament.
Yeah.
We're always telling people, okay, take Hingis, who won Junior Wimbledon at 12. Martina Hingis, Venus Williams, and Davenport.
Mm-hmm.
They all became number one. They're all basically the same age, and they all went up the mountain a different way.
Yeah.
Where Hingis, I mean, so good, so young. John Lofton-Diaga, who we worked with short term, a South African, played mixed with her 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
And that's that line we have is get some popcorn, get a hot dog, go sit in section F. But Hingis could have served so much better.
Yeah.
Her story where Gilbert was saying, you got to throw a football. Well, you got to teach people how to throw the football.
Yeah.
You got to know how that arm turns out, what you do with that last segment. But then Davenport, who pretty much she did at the USTA and regular high school, but Venus didn't play at tournaments after the age of 10.
Yeah, I think that's what I took away from the podcast guest a couple episodes back that worked with Raynich. I think it was him that was just saying match play. Casey Curtis. Match play is what really is important. Select your tournaments here and there, but just get the match play skill down, and then the tournaments will take care of themselves when you decide.
Yeah, play anybody and everybody. You eventually can get some good wins, and how long can you do the plank, and how long can you do the iron V, and how many squat thrusts can you do in a minute, and film yourself doing push-ups and on and on. And it's not a matter of spending all this money early on, getting on airplanes, renting cars, checking in hotels. I remember Peter saying that the best place to teach tennis is in countries where the kids have not seen pro tennis.
Yeah.
And that there was a gentleman who was in a lot of countries where, doing things for the underprivileged and kids that, I mean, he taught a lot of places where people are learning to play barefoot.
Yep. Yeah, they put in a couple tennis courts in that school in India, so they were learning there.
Yeah, and today, with young kids looking at YouTube clips, but all these podcasts, and I appreciate you listening to these podcasts and others, where Julian Krinsky, I'm in the 5% who chased 95% of the business.
Yeah.
Now here in Florida, so many players are just the opposite. They're the pros are 95% of the pros are chasing 5% of the business.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And a lot of them are looking for people who already can hit the ball.
Yep.
Something we need to say over and over again is throughout our country, here in the U.S., is we need to do a push on pre-academies. Mm-hmm. I think one thing about an isolated area like Utah And 100 years ago, I did some things in Utah with the late Tommy Fye and the Utah Tennis Association. It was actually Dave Anderson, Craig Tiley, the three of us saying, oh, this would be a great market, isolated. It's out there. It's not Southern Cal. Like here in Florida, I mean, from South Miami to North Miami Beach is just one huge megatropolis. Mm-hmm. And the consumer's confused.
Yeah.
I think, that's one thing about Tyler, Texas. Although I can remember Gail Scott, the mom of Julie Scott, who really changed some bad technique and had a very successful career at Stanford. Didn't really, for any length of period, pursue pro tennis, but I can remember the mom turning down the USTA. I was like, just no, we're good.
Yeah.
This is fine. We just train here, and having respect for the people who are working with you, and you don't have. It's not like the grass is greener on the other side. But being in Utah, I think of the evolution of tennis in Canada. Richard Hernandez, who we've had on as a guest a couple of times, he did such an outstanding job training tennis juniors early on. But before this wave of recent Canadians, the Canadians had this inferiority complex that they had to leave.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that you find in Utah is that we have to go to Southern Cal.
Yeah.
They can get down there from tournaments, but tennis players come from everywhere, and too much too soon. A kid gets to be 15, 16 years old. Okay, we can leave, but I think also you saw us doing a little bit of that today on film and on court is the peer teaching. Mm-hmm. Yep. To be in the business of having indoor court times, that's one thing is just lowering your overhead by having less pros.
Yeah.
Increasing your revenue by being able to teach more kids on one court.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
In closing, let's go touch a little about Peter. I think it's just great, the verb edify. What he did for tennis, it needs to not be forgotten.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I feel like that's one of the, having been so, for a period of my life involved with PBI, that there's a good portion of the tennis community that doesn't know anything about Peter. And yeah, they should, because it really, I think he was a force. They taught, PBI, we taught so many people, through the hotels and country clubs that they came through. And then, I think it's also just Peter was, for people in the company, he was, some of the guys would refer to him, especially when, I think earlier in the company, it was kind of like a father figure and really tried to push these people to really develop. So I think he just was in the human, development business as well. So
that's a great way to put it, human development. Well, one thing, hats off to you. To me, those coaches, and it wasn't the same four. Mm-hmm. I think of Chris Dyer, Bruce Hasse, John Murray, Joe Denoffer, mm-hmm. Dan Obashan, Sandy Hastings. This is just from the top of my head.
Yeah.
And what they did for us. And again, it was just a weekend seminar, but what we would do is we would film it, mm-hmm. and then we would relive it. So when they came in and told us, okay, this is how you train someone for an interview.
Yeah.
I'm dumb, but I'm not stupid. Is we drilled in our lab, interviews.
Yeah.
And if we learned Peter Burwash drills in our lab, we practiced Peter Burwash drills. And that's what has to happen again in American tennis. We need to find a way to mentor young coaches. They can't be at their fingertips. Okay, I watched a YouTube clip. They make too much money too soon. Yeah. The governing body of tennis, for the longest time, it was too politically correct. But the USTA does this where they police. I mean, that's too strong a word. I don't think that. I think we need to have more police. My father wouldn't let us use the word cop. We need more officers. But with the people who work for the USTA who travel and they watch umpires at the grassroots level, mm-hmm. and they're like, how do you get to go to the U.S. Open?
Yeah.
Is they have people evaluate the work mm-hmm. of the umpires. Yeah. The USTA, first of all, they'd have to have their own, like, okay, let's get our ducks in a row, and can we agree the tennis court's a rectangle? Instead of say, well, we have all these parameters. Well, you can teach this and you can teach that, and it's like, come on. Yeah. Kids under the age of say 10. Okay, what's going to be the alphabet of tennis? Are we going to agree that A is A, and this is the sound and shape? Yeah. Can we move on to B? There's too much art involved. Yeah. Okay, it is an art, but it is a science. But come on, let's at least get good grips, good balance, good shapes of the swing. And but what I say hats off to you is that those people that came in, I mean, to the T, and I know the people that I trained that PBI hired, quality people. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So hats off to you for being selected.
Thank you.
No, it's been great to have you on as a guest. Anything you want to sign off with when it comes down to words for tennis, words for GreatBase, but most importantly, words for PBI?
Yeah, just, I hope, PBI continues and just doesn't lose sight of, kind of Peter and kind of the feel that it had, because it really was a great organization to be a part of when I was in it. And, the bigger, I really wanted to come out to meet you, so I was grateful for you having me.
We've talked many, many times on the phone, but we just met in person.
Yeah. So thank you for putting all of this together, and it really has helped me with my career, and just appreciate knowing more of the game, like you said, the tree of where everything comes from. So it's given me a greater appreciation. So I thank you.
No, you're more than welcome, and I love the energy level when I just hear people that okay. I've read these books now.
Yeah.
Where we've led you to these books and such but for us, I think our listeners just need to hear loud and clear, is that PBI came before us, and the word pillar is very strong. Mm-hmm. Is that the people that I trained in depth, they went back and it should just jog their memory brain, because we practiced. They would come in and run a workshop, and we would say, okay, we had a course called programming, mm-hmm. calendar of events, and flyers. Yep. And the training that the PBI pros gave us for that. And, from that, we had part of our lab on a rainy day, people would rotate inside. We had to teach people to string and such. Mm-hmm. People would rotate inside, and it was through PBI where I was taught, what did I know about it? Zero. Is, okay, you take a piece of paper and you do a threefold. And we had a nice little wing of a lower floor building next to the tennis courts, and we had every brochure. We were writing magazine after magazine and getting every brochure, and people were, I think another thing that we haven't touched upon is, I would just put the outline together, and the Peter staff would come in and just nail it, like outstanding. And every kid who went through that just was amazed how powerful those seminars were. Yeah. And one was, you're a new pro, and what are you going to do? You're a new pro, and it's like, I'm going to give every member a free, 15, 20-minute tennis lesson. I'm going to have free a stroke of the day. Mm-hmm. And you're going to give and give and give to get. Yeah. And you're not going to find, I'll find one or two students, and, I'll just give lessons to this kid. And it's like, and then communication. Yeah.
Appreciation, communication. Yeah.
Yeah. Peter's a Burwash drill. Burwash, to me, I've drilled people to say this. That's where we would have to really, the memory bank, but all the Peter Burwashisms. One is, you come in the world with nothing, and you leave the world with nothing, and you have to appreciate everything in between. Yeah.
He had a book called Master the Dash, which is the dash in your tombstone. The 2 dates in the dash.
Master the Dash. That's a great one to end on. But Jacob Hansen, thank you. Why don't we wave to our listeners? I know a few people who actually they string rackets while they listen to these. I think it's because they want to see my. People don't know who Bob Hope is, but I got this big ski slope, and to look at my beautiful profile. But anyway, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.
Another podcast in the books.
Yeah,
we'll do it again. Give me the high five.
Thank you.
All right, team. Good night. It's almost midnight. Should know that.